Hey everybody, big announcement today. Logic 10.4.5, which was demoed last week at the developers conference, was released. And so now we have access to all this additional track counts and some other really cool features. It's not a big update, but certainly there's at least one thing in here that I've been waiting for almost the entire time that I've been a Logic user. Not quite, but for the majority of the time I've been a Logic user, one feature has finally come out, which has to do with freezing tracks. Anyway, the real big announcement was that we now can go up to 1,000 tracks of all the different types. My computer can't handle 1,000 tracks. This one here is actually my recording computer for tutorials, but I have another iMac which has an 8-core, and it can do a lot more than this computer, but I'm demoing on this one because of one of the biggest things that I think really came out in this particular release. So if you want to see a whole thing about this, we have our release notes menu option, and that brings open Safari. Should be loading up here any second. And so I just want to go through a couple of the biggest things that we have, but you're going to see a ton of fixes and optimizations, things that you wouldn't normally really think about or even notice in most cases, a ton of things which are going to make some of your lives better if you do things a certain way and it was just crashing. So a lot of bug fixes and things like that. Some small updates to how some of the plugins work. A lot of optimizations though, and a lot of this designed at those who want to do big sessions on the new Mac Pro, which is coming out this fall. So I personally just immediately loaded up 15 tracks and put Alchemy on each one of them so I could just see how some of the basic stuff was happening. And I do have, let's see, in here, I pulled this up. Let me mute this audio. This is the old version. I did it in here real quick just so you could see how similar it is. But with this, let's mute that too. You're going to see that it totally is clipped out there when the instruments are playing. And it's just using 2 of the cores on this computer. And we're not going to see a difference with all of that on the new. Right here, you're going to see it still clips out, still just using 2 cores. So I was a little bit bummed. I know there's a reason for this. I know that there's certainly some stuff under the hood, which in a computer like this with just 4, that it needs to put a lot of the instruments in 2 and save the other 2 for other things like effects and running and audio processing off the drive and all of that. But still, not a lot of difference in just the small session like this. But this is where we actually come into probably one of my new favorite things. I'm going to add the freeze track here. Let me scroll out so we don't have to do the whole project. And this is actually going to make me record something because you can't just freeze an empty track. Okay. So now we have a little bit of something in each of the tracks. I'm going to freeze it. Push play, same functionality as before. But now it's going to freeze all of the tracks, gets into the empty space. It'll just go out to the end here of the project. Should be a little faster for the rest of it. But now, so the big difference with this, and they really snuck this in and haven't really, a lot of the sites that are talking about the update haven't really talked about this particular thing much. It actually unloads that instrument from the track, and it'll unload everything that gets frozen. So Alchemy now, instead of just simply being frozen and leaving the instrument there and all of the files in the RAM, which with orchestral banks was a huge problem. So say I want to do a full orchestral thing on a limited computer, I'm freezing tracks. It's leaving the samples in the actual memory. And so it doesn't actually help you overall. It actually creates a huge bottleneck still. Now, all of that stuff is unloaded. And you can see all of them now play just fine and have no issues. So I can now, even on a limited computer like this, it'll be just like this as an audio file. Instead of still maintaining parts of that, it'll actually just take all of that stuff off. So now if I want to edit something, I just unfreeze it, make my changes, refreeze it. Takes a second to refreeze a single track, and we're back to having very manageable processing. This, for me, is almost more important than spending $20,000 on the new Mac Pro, because now I can realistically run a huge session. It's just going to be dependent on my hard drives, which I can spread my files out if I need to. I can get a nice RAID or whatever. I can do a lot more manageable things with a hard disk than I can if I can't freeze the tracks properly. Okay, so a couple other things that came out. Let's just load up another channel here. We also have the new de-esser 2. So this is a lot more comprehensive than the previous one. I haven't actually tested it out much yet, but I will be testing it out. This is a tool that if you have an S problem that you want a good de-esser, so it's nice to have a better one in the toolkit. They were also saying that the expander now is an updated interface. And probably, let's actually load up the new Sculpture here. So Sculpture, it's the same instrument, but they've upgraded the resolution of the interface. So now it's a little clearer to look at things, and it's a little bit easier to read. It's the same interface, but certainly it's nice to be able to have a little bit better resolution on it and things like that, because there's a lot of small little pieces to this and a lot of details. It really needs a full overhaul. But until they do that, this kind of thing is a nice little upgrade. So we have that. Let's go back here for a moment. So you can see optimizing for the new Mac Pro up to 56 cores. Let's see, only load plugins needed for Project Playback. This is actually really useful, again, aimed at the huge sessions. So if you have a huge session template, instead of loading every instrument up, it's only going to load the ones, for instance, that have tracks with content in them to actually play. So it'll keep the other ones offloaded until you need them. This is amazing when you're actually having huge templates with full orchestras and things like that. Increased number of tracks, we talked about that, the new de-esser, expander, the new MIDI clock, MTC and MMC from Logic, up to 16 ports, each with unique settings. This is great if you're using external gear, which I know a lot of film composers and such. This is really a film composer upgrade, I would say, overall. Hardly anybody else is going to be using 1,000 instrument channel strips. I mean, that's just not what most people are going to be using. Pop music, rock music, jazz, EDM, we don't use 1,000 tracks in those styles. And so this is really aimed at the film scoring composer. I mean, that's, I guess, simply stated, that's it. It's nice because we'll benefit from it. Things will get better for the rest of us as well. And I do some film compositions, but even with those, I'm, maxing out around 200 tracks or something at the very biggest, not going to 1,000, rarely. A couple other things here. We have user defaults can now be set up for the mixer configuration. This is nice. That means we can set up something with our just default. Our loop browser can filter by loop type, and we can drag multiples out. We have some other options here for recording, and then it just kind of gets a little bit smaller and smaller and smaller. Most of these are really going to be everything from optimizations to just efficiencies. So here's the freeze track. Also, option clicking the on-off button for a track now unloads the plugins on the channel strip. So let's check that one out real quick. We have this right here. So it's not on by default, but let's turn that on now. So it says we can option click. Let's unfreeze this one for a moment. Let's add an EQ and a compressor. So turning it off just doesn't do much. It just turns off the track from playing. It does save you some resources. But now we're going to option click that. and you can see they're still there, but they're just offloaded now. So instead of, again, hanging out, if you have some tracks, say, and again, in a big template, that you've created a bunch of stuff and you're not going to be using a whole section, you can just simply, like for instance, let's do this here. Let's click a few of these and turn them all off, or unfreeze them rather. And let's do option click on these 4. It's now going to leave it all there, but it's going to be turned off, and all of the stuff in the channel strip will be offloaded, but still easily accessible. So that goes in with the freezing thing for me. Huge difference for workflows on computers which maybe just aren't as powerful and you don't want to get a brand new one. I mean, the new Mac Pro is going to be really expensive, and to get the fully loaded one is the same price as buying a really nice car. So, I mean, not a really nice car, but definitely a decent car that's going to work. So, along with that, we have a couple more things. So, how you do the horizontal scrolling, double shift click in the background, shift double click rather. So that's actually kind of useful. And then there's a new thing inside the keyboard command shortcut. So shift double click anywhere, and you can actually, because before you can't ever really get there without using kind of a workaround. That's one of them, using the marquee tool. Now we can shift double click and play from anywhere. That's another another thing that is nice to be able to add to this, because it's something I think we've been missing, is being able to just play wherever our cursor is. Still requires a shortcut, but I'll take it. The only thing that is now missing from what I would want if I were going to use this truly as a post-production tool is the offline process history that we have in like Cubase or Nuendo for our selection-based processing. And I was going to load up something here, but we'll see if I can do it. It looks like I just got the ball of death. And that is just happening because I'm sure with the new update, it's going to just simply go through all my loops again and re-index them or something along those lines. So let's see if this stops in a second. There it is. Perfect. Didn't take too long. Let's just pull out an audio file here. The last thing I was going to say is with processing, selection-based processing, we have our menu here. So this is great. I love being able to apply stuff to the clip itself. So if I'm doing sound effects or sound design in a big mix project for some sort of media, I can add stuff to it without having to put an effect on the entire thing. This just means I still have to work the old school way where I'm coming through and I'm going to use something like track alternatives. The very first time that I have something, I'm going to duplicate it, and then I'm going to do some selection-based processing, so I can always get back to the original very easily. With this, this same tool, but in Nuendo, you can do this, but when you go back into it, so say I add some plugins, right? Make some change, we apply this, it gets added to that clip. I close this down. Later on, when I come back in here, I want to be able to make a change to this and it ripple the changes through the actual files. Right now, it's not doing that. So it's already been added to it. We'd have to undo it first and then redo it. So that's the one last thing I'm hoping for eventually with Logic, and that would make this the ultimate post-production powerhouse in terms of so many of the things that they've added over the years. Okay, so no matter what, this version, this 10.4.5 is such a welcome addition, and it has brought some surprisingly powerful changes, even though it didn't change a lot. It's certainly something that we've been looking forward to, and we're super excited about. So what did you think about it? Which things were added that you're excited for? Which things do you think are still missing? Go through all the things in that release notes about what they've updated or refined or fixed. There was a lot of stuff going on. I love that they're fixing so many things without focusing too much on adding so many things, because we've got so many features. Let's now make sure that they're all working as they should be. Okay, hope you're having a great day. We're going to do one more video tomorrow before this week off. Hope you're having a great week. Talk to you later.